Hey, this is Helen Bauer. Thank you for listening to the show. We've got some great episodes coming up as season 9 of the podcast starts in just a few weeks. We'll be getting back to the basics of good hospice care, and you won't want to miss a special series with hospice educator Barbara Carnes. To make sure you catch every episode, be sure to follow The Heart of Hospice wherever you listen to podcasts. And now, on to today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
We see a need for them to get their cup filled, I think, for one thing. I think that the work you all do can be so emotionally exhausting that you have to find a way to, and you're just pouring, right? To use the cup analogy, you're just pouring out of your own cup so much, you have to stop and get your cup filled.
Today's guest, Erin Whalen of Compassionate Coaching, is helping end-of-life and bereavement teams avoid employee burnout and turnover in a very unique way. Whether you are a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice podcast is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
The sponsor for this week's episode is Barbara Carnes Books, featuring the work of award-winning hospice RN educator Barbara Carnes. BK Books is proud to offer the End-of-Life Guidelines series, a compilation of 5 essential education booklets designed to support those caring for terminally ill loved ones. Visit bkbooks.com today to order the End-of-Life Guidelines series to support your journey of compassionate caregiving. This episode of The Heart of Hospice is sponsored by Odonata Care. When caring for a loved one on hospice, support becomes essential. Introducing the Care Plan, a path to comfort for the hospice patient, a supportive guide by experienced hospice nurses Nancy Hireman and Brenda Kazire. Nancy and Brenda invite you to experience all that the Care Plan has to offer. Be sure to check out their free library of care videos on thecareplan.net or on YouTube. Purchase your copy of the Care Plan today at thecareplan.net.
My guest today is the beautiful Erin Whalen. She's the founder of Compassionate Coaching. She's been a professional actor and role player for 17 years and has been a playback theater practitioner for 11 years. Never had a guest quite like Erin on the show before, and you're going to hear about the unique work that she's doing. She's also going to share how she entered into the end-of-life space and how she's supporting teams through her work at Compassionate Coaching. Erin also has a personal story of anticipatory grief and loss. Erin's older sister Gina had cerebral palsy and died in 2016. Erin says that she was born into a life with anticipatory grief because of Gina's condition and knowing that Gina would eventually die. After a conversation with a family member, Erin came to realize that she is who she is and does her work because of her relationship with Gina. The workshops provided by Compassionate Coaching help end-of-life workers find ways to refill their cup. They use playback theater to help end-of-life and bereavement workers avoid burnout, and they utilize a process called take and leave, which helps them find balance after a workshop. She's going to explain how that works as well. If you want to connect with Erin and find out how you can be a part of playback theater from Compassionate Coaching, check out compassionatecoaching.org. Now on to my conversation with Erin Whalen. welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. I'm so glad to have you with me today.
I am so glad to be here, Helen. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
We have a fantastic conversation today because we're going to be talking about an event that I got to participate in with you and the work that you do. So it's going to be a fun conversation. I think we're going to learn a lot about something very unique that you guys are doing. But I want to start with an icebreaker question.
Okay.
From the Death Deck, because I'm a little Death Deck obsessed, I will have to confess. And you're familiar with the Death Deck.
I am familiar, though I do not yet own my own Death Deck.
So wonderful. I love to pull them out at random. I'm a little weird like that, but so much fun. So I pulled a card at random. So here is your question, and it's actually called Message from Beyond.
Ooh.
If you could send one post-death message from beyond, what would you tell your family?
Oh.
And this can go a lot of different ways. I like this one.
I mean, I would probably tell my family, being my husband and my son, I would probably say something like, get here soon. It's awesome. Or something like, because I do believe that I'll be somewhere. I'll be in a place and it'll be awesome. And so something along the lines of like, I'm doing great and I want you to come here too.
Ooh, I like that. So I'm going to answer this one too.
Please do.
If I could send one post-death message to my family, I think it would be to my kids. I have two daughters. And it would be something like, you think I don't see you, but I do.
I love that. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it going that way, but that's also a good angle to take.
Or something like, stand up straight.
Yeah.
They would know it was coming from me. They would know it was coming from me if I said something like that.
Like I always tell my son, you can be mad, but not mean. So I would probably like catch him in some mean moments and remind him of that. And he would know who it was coming from.
I have a tendency to say, be a friend and make good choices.
Make good choices is another one.
My kids are grown. They have their own kids, but sometimes I still say that.
Yeah.
So that would be a good message.
Yeah. Oh, we could talk about this all day.
I know. We could actually think of something creepy to say to them, like something only we would know.
I know. That would be fun.
Yeah, this is a good conversation.
This is really good. Thank goodness for the Death Deck. This is a good little way of starting conversations about death.
Yeah, I like the way it kind of goes off the rails if you do it right. It's a little cuckoo. So we're going to be talking about your work, right? As much as we love the Death Deck, we want to talk about the work that you're doing at Compassionate Coaching. Just to get us started, tell me in 2 words how you got into this work.
Helen, I came up with a couple different pairs of words.
That's good. You got options? Let's hear.
I mean, if I'm being 100% authentic, I think the 2 words I would say would be Holy Spirit. I do think this was one of those divine appointment situations, because it doesn't make sense in a lot of ways for me to be doing this work. I've never done the work of an end of life professional, and so it feels a little strange to be an outsider, so to speak, going in and serving them. So it really feels like an unnatural, if you will, like something else had to be at work, prompting me to do that work than just me deciding it was the next step, because it wasn't the next step at all.
Right.
So that's one. That's the first. If I'm being honest, that's the most authentic 2 words that I would say.
I like that. And a lot of people who work in end of life and death industries will tell you the same thing, that it wasn't something they sought out, that they just sort of were moved into it. I won't say pushed or forced into it, but somehow their lives moved in a way that morphed into that for them.
I could see that.
I think that's very true of a lot of end of life professionals. Yeah. Okay, so I want to hear about compassionate coaching. Tell me about the work that you and your team are doing there.
So we do a couple things that I'll put into two buckets, if you will. So first, let me say that at Compassionate Coaching, what we do is we support end-of-life and bereavement professionals, and we want to be there to help them stay out of burnout so that they can stay in that field as long as they want, as long as they feel called to do so, or as long as their heart desires. So we're there to support them. And the two buckets are, the first bucket is a sense of team building or connection work that we do. It centers around playback theater, which you experienced. And it can be anything from, like you attended, like a 1-hour event. It could be a long-term relationship we have with, let's say, a hospice team. It could be a retreat that we offer, but it's really hands-on, interactive, innovative, memorable work that we do to help that team connect to each other and connect to their why they're doing this work, why they're here, why they haven't left. Because there is turnover and there's also not turnover. So why are you still here? What is compelling you to stay, since it is such a hard field? So that's kind of that first bucket. And then the second bucket, I need to find a new phrase than bucket. Like bucket sounds, it doesn't work.
It communicates. I think it communicates well.
Well, that's interesting you say communicates well, because the second bucket is communication skills coaching.
Mm.
And so you haven't experienced that, but you can imagine experiencing the first bucket of what we do. You can imagine that our communication skills coaching is equally as interactive and unique. And what I do is I bring in professional role players who can be anyone that someone wants to practice having a challenging conversation with. And then I facilitate the process so that people can practice those really hard conversations in that safe, low stakes environment. And they can get insight from the role player, from their colleagues about how it's going, get insight from themselves, a self-evaluation of how do I feel saying these things? What's activated in me? What's triggering to me? Why is that triggering? Oh, it reminds me of this person or that conversation I've had. And so that's the other thing we do, skills building around communication skills coaching.
That's huge. That is huge, because that is one of the things we have so much trouble with. End-of-life professionals, we care, we're compassionate, we're skilled, but when it comes to communicating around certain things, we don't do well. And we put up a lot of barriers, time barriers, documentation barriers. We don't know people's culture. We're uncomfortable. And what it comes down to, I think, is to communicate those things, to start those conversations and have those conversations, I think is painfully relatable. It doesn't matter whether this person is the same age, the same gender, the same culture, same sexual identity. It's another human being that's at the end of life. And that is relatable for all of us. Always relatable. So communication is a huge thing. So let's back up a little bit. I'd like to talk about your personal story. As much as you want to share, remember, Erin, you put the boundaries on your story today with me. You had a sister who passed away in 2016, and lifelong experience with her medical condition, her health condition. Can you talk about that with me? Tell my listeners about the grief that you experienced during your sister's life.
Yeah. So my sister, her name is Gina, and I'm the youngest of 4, and Gina was the second oldest. And she had really severe cerebral palsy. And she used a wheelchair. She needed support for all activities of daily living, all of them. And so I literally entered the world through the lens of anticipatory grief. And I never knew that phrase until a few years ago, because it was just my daily life. It was just this sense of Gina's going to die. We just don't know when. And so that was my upbringing. That was my family of origin. That kind of colored everything that I experienced in my life, was that we all were almost collectively holding our breath and wondering, when is Gina going to die? And it really shaped me. I know a lot of people think about the before and after someone dies, which is definitely, true for me. And yet, because of her condition and because that was the only world I ever knew, what I found was actually more profound and more of a milestone, maybe an equal milestone, but still a very strong milestone for me, was reaching the age that Gina never got to.
Yes.
Which I recently experienced. And so that was really, I'm in this second half of life now where I'm older than, my older sister ever got to. And so that's been really interesting and informative of my life now and my choices and my, how I'm choosing to live my life.
I think that's an interesting grief milestone that we don't talk about a whole lot. For someone who's lost a sibling, someone who loses a parent, and then as that person ages, they get to the age where their significant person died, and they realize, I'm now older. I'm seeing time and experiences that my loved one did not see. Yeah. And even if it's been a long time, that's still a significant event. Yeah. So inside your household with your family, was there an acknowledgement or any discussion of how this impacted you as a kid? Did your parents bring it up or ever, try to support you and help you understand that there would be a loss for you?
I don't distinctly remember that. I don't have a memory of that. I think it was just hung in the air. But I don't remember actual conversations. And so that it's really interesting. And I think things are different now. This was the early 80s when I have conscious memories of my childhood. And I think that now things would be different. Back then, I don't remember anything like that.
So did your parents since ever have conversations with you?
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny, and I can only speak for myself, but I think I'm a lot freer now to think about Gina and to talk about Gina and to have those conversations now, and to really be in a processing mode. It's almost like I had to wait. This sounds weird, but it's almost like I had to wait for her to die to process. And it just, now I'm looking back and saying, oh, wow, that was really interesting that was the lens I viewed my life in. I mean, it makes sense, but I guess I didn't see it because I think the lens was just so ever present that I didn't know it was a lens.
I mean, it was just the life. It was just the environment you were born into. It was just your family.
It was just my normal.
Well, and I think unless you have parents or adult role models inside your family who are having those conversations and using those words, and those words are heinous, right? Nobody wants to think about their child dying.
Right.
Regardless of what their health status is, whatever disability or health problems, it's still incredibly painful to think about a child loss.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. That's the other thing too, is that, I can look at it from my perspective and say, yes, my sister died. I can't imagine my parents' perspective of having their daughter die. That's just horrendous to me. And it's not even as though there was a time of health for Gina. It wasn't like, oh, we have these memories of our child while she was healthy and then she got sick. It was, her life was always marked by pain and illness and the just disability. Not even sure, honestly, if that's the right word I should use. Her disability was, it was so severe. Like, she really was very, very much not in good health. And so to not even have that memory of, going back and seeing a time when Gina was healthy. And so they always had that, I'm sure, that worry, that awareness that she was going to die, and that, how can you prepare for that? I don't know. And then it's a lot to think of, well, you have these other children too, and prepare them. But there wasn't even a lot of time for any of that, because it was just, her needs were so great that the days were just so full.
Yeah. You were just trying to be a family. Your parents were just trying to parent you. And they were living in a state of anticipatory grief from the moment Gina was born.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you balance that with the guilt that you might have over, maybe I don't give my kids without the health issues the same amount of attention that they need? Yeah, there's a whole lot of emotional stuff that's wound up in that. That's a very complicated situation. So in retrospect, being able to look at it and think about the anticipatory grief, I mean, really, what parent, unless you've got great grief support around you, what parent really knows how to navigate that kind of situation for 4 children, 3 of whom are healthy and one who's not?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like we both know, the support now is very different than the support back then. And so, it's a matter of access to resources and knowledge that they're there, and time to manage it all.
Yeah.
And so it's and I'm sure there's a sense of denial too, of, I mean, you couldn't really be in Gina's presence without thinking of, illness and challenge. And yet she, easily surpassed her life expectancy. And so in that sense, there was this hope. And, I don't want to say denial. It was, staring us in the face, the fact that, she was ill. And yet I wonder if there was denial there of, being so busy with the day-to-day that you don't even take the time to say, okay, she's going to die and we don't know when. It's a lot. It's a lot to process and to look back on and to think about.
Yeah. I think when you're in the middle of it, it's one of those, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
Right? The
That's
day-to-day
well
functioning is so much more important. That has to take precedent, and the other stuff you just set aside because it's too heavy to begin with, but you don't have time and space for it because, you're managing the day-to-day. Totally true. So how did your experience with your sister change or inspire the work that you do at Compassionate Coaching?
When I think about my sister and her death, I think about this moment I had with one of my cousins at her wake, at Gina's wake. And my cousin, whom I'm very close to, she came up to me and she said, I don't know if this is going to come out right, but I just want you to know, I think that, your experience with your sister and, growing up in that way has made you who you are. And it's made you a more, I don't remember what word she used, empathetic, compassionate, caring person. And I think she was hesitant because she was basically saying, you're a very kind, compassionate, empathetic person. And that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with, the situation you were born into. but I agree. Like, I really do think that it shaped everything for me. And I think I was kind of like a prime, my personality, like I'm a very highly sensitive person. I'm introverted. I'm very creative and very inward going, reflective, deep processor, like all those things. And so I think I was able to take that experience with my sister and really allow the work that I do to be born from that. And so I really think, it sounds kind of corny, but I really do think that I'm more of who I should be because of Gina and because of my experience living, with her with a very severe illness, a very, very stark suffering. And I really think that just, I'm almost envisioning like a branding, like on my soul or my heart.
Yeah.
And it's not anything that I can take credit for. It's just, that's just the way the world works, that God works, that I was given that environment and my natural personality. And so I think my company was born through that, through that proximity to suffering.
Yeah. It changed you and shaped you. And it's Gina's legacy. It's truly what it is. It's all you, right? Because these are your natural gifts anyway. But the experience shaped who you were. You can't deny that.
No.
That's an amazing thing to be able to happen to you, to make meaning out of something. People would say that Gina's life didn't affect anybody. She didn't do any great work. She was dependent for everybody. But look what change she affected in you.
That is really beautiful. Yeah. I wrote a poem in college. I took a creative writing class and I wrote a poem, and it was dedicated to Gina. And it was basically like, I can do all the things you can't do. And it just the bittersweetness of that. And there's a pressure there of like the sense of like, oh, well, she can't decide I'm going to go for a walk. Like, she doesn't have that luxury, right? Like, I guess even though I don't feel like it, I should go for a walk. And so there's a sense of like pressure, and yet there is this sense of opportunity and legacy, and wanting to honor her in that way.
Yeah, it's a nice way. It's wonderful. You have the natural gifts and you're willing to use them, and you recognize that without your relationship and your experience to Gina, maybe you wouldn't be doing these things. Maybe you would be doing something different. But you use it in such a meaningful way.
Yeah, thank you. That's very true.
This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
Want to learn more about caring for someone at end of life? Discover the End of Life Guidelines series by Barbara Carnes. Here's Barbara Carnes to tell you more.
There is a normal, natural way of dying. My materials are written to guide and support anyone who is addressing end-of-life situations. The goal is to help people have a positive experience so families will have a sacred memory to carry with them.
The End of Life Guidelines series prepares readers for the natural, normal process of dying and grief. It's a compilation of 5 of our most popular books, including A Time to Live, Living with a Life-Threatening Illness, The 11th Hour, A Caring Guideline for the Hours to Minutes Before Death, Pain and End of Life, What You Need to Know About End-of-Life Comfort and Pain Management, My Friend, I Care, The Grief Experience, and the most widely used hospice book, Gone From My Sight. To order the End of Life Guidelines series, visit bkbooks.com. This series is available in digital format, and volume discounts are also available. Just visit bkbooks.com. If you're a hospice caregiver looking for resources to enhance your care, look no further than the Hospice Care Plan, A Path to Comfort. Available in both English or Spanish, this invaluable resource is designed to support caregivers in providing the best possible care for their loved ones. The Hospice Care Plan for Modonata Care now has integrated QR codes in each section of the booklet. Readers simply scan the code with a smartphone, and a free playlist of videos provides practical tips for caregiving and symptom management. It's like having a personalized guide at your fingertips. Caregivers will find 150 videos offering expert advice and practical guidance to navigate every aspect of caregiving. Hospice agencies and end-of-life doulas are now using the Hospice Care Plan booklet to support their patients and caregivers. It's become a trusted resource in the end-of-life community, helping to educate and equip caregivers. Visit thehospicecareplan.com today to purchase the Hospice Care Plan booklet. Empower yourself and the ones you care for with a Hospice Care Plan, a path to comfort. That's thehospicecareplan.com.
Okay, so end-of-life workers. We're a hard bunch of folks. We work in a hard area. It's difficult work. What are the needs that you see in end-of-life workers, the folks that participate in the playback theater and the communication skills, teams building services that you offer?
So what do we see in end-of-life workers? Like, what do we see there?
What needs do you see there?
What needs do we see there? I think we see a need for them to get their cup filled. I think for one thing, I think that the work you all do can be so emotionally exhausting that you have to find a way to, and you're just pouring, right? To use the cup analogy, you're just pouring out of your own cup so much, you have to stop and get your cup filled. So I see a definite need of end-of-life workers to find ways to get their energy back, to get their cup filled, to find fulfillment outside of, I would say outside of the work they do, because I'm sure that the work is so fulfilling in and of itself, and yet it comes with that double-edged sword of emotional exhaustion. And so there have to be ways to replenish. I see a great need for rest. I think that rest, I'm in a season of rest myself, having been exposed to migraines for the first time in my life about 6 months ago.
Oh, wow.
And it really taught me to rest and not push so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's showing me the value of that. And it's showing me, I see in other people, whether or not they're end-of-life workers or not, but just I can see, I'm like, oh, they're pushing too hard.
Yes.
They need to stop and rest. And I think community, I think I see a real need for community. I think that sometimes, not for everyone who works in end of life, but I think a lot of people feel isolated. And I think that they need, a good antidote to that isolation is a sense of community.
Yeah. Even for end-of-life workers that work as a team, a hospice interdisciplinary team, because we do have end-of-life workers like death doulas and end-of-life doulas that are working independently. We can still become isolated. And I think the pandemic taught us that lesson, that the teams can be fractured. We ended up being sort of labeled as you're either essential or non-essential. And so we trimmed away the non-essential folks. Some of them got laid off. They were restricted from making patient or caregiver visits, and it really squashed our gifts. And for a lot of these end-of-life workers, this is what they do naturally. It's very normal for them to pour that out. And so we became isolated. And then when we started doing the telehealth and pulling away from being in person, the isolation increased even more. And then not being able to be present when our patients were dying. Especially not the way we typically do, right? The pandemic really restricted how much we could, how our contact was managed. We did become isolated. And I think it is very possible to sit in a room of people that are doing the same work that you're doing and still feel very alone.
Yes.
It's still possible. And community, that team community, is what saves us. It re-engages us, keeps us going, and it renews us. But the rest is a big thing. That need for rest, because we have a tendency, I think, in end-of-life care to think if we are not flying around with our hair on fire, then we're not doing it right.
Right. I get that. I get that a lot. And I think there's an urgency too. There must be a sense of urgency that, there's literally an end to someone's life and you have a lot of things that you want to do, or a lot of visits, or a lot of time, or a lot, whatever it is before that final breath. And it reminds me of something I've been thinking about a lot with Gina, is that, and I think it's very common in a lot of subcultures in our country. I grew up in the Midwest, and this hard work ethic was very prevalent. And it's very interesting that I realized recently was connected to health in my mind subconsciously, because Gina was still, right?
Not a productive person.
Yeah, not productive at all. Right. Quote unquote. Just literally still, like she couldn't move herself. She had to be moved physically from room to room or position to position. And then, my grandmother, on the other hand, was 99 when she died. And I think that she was still living in her 3-story home by herself until the age of maybe 94.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and she just busy, just very, very active and always moving. And so I think I think I see that, not just in my own family or, the culture I grew up in of Midwest, where you just that work ethic and that pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But yeah, I see that with end-of-life workers too, the sense of like, just keep going, don't stop.
Right.
And I wonder, Helen, and you would be able to answer this, authentically, and I couldn't. Is there a sense that if you stop, you won't be able to start up again?
That's an interesting question. Almost as if you stop, it would take so much energy to get going, or you would pause and actually think about how heavy this is, how hard the work is, and analyze it to the point where you're like, well, I must be crazy as hell. I need to stop. Yeah. Why in the world am I doing this? Right. I think we also have the pressure of productivity, because this is an industry, right? It's a business that we have, where you need to make so many visits and you need to get this accomplished. And it's all goes back to numbers, in addition to the numbered days that our patients have. We know that most of our patients, we don't have very much time with them. And we really do try to give them everything we can. So I want to dip into the process that you guys use for playback theater, because I was so lucky. I got a VIP sort of backstage pass, and then I got to participate in the playback theater this week. So it's really fresh on my mind, and I had such a good time, and it was really moving, and I got to see how other people experienced it. Can you talk about the detailed process? I know we can't go too deep into it because we won't have enough time, but what's the process for playback theater, and how do the viewers or the listeners, like I was, how did they get drawn in and engaged in the process?
That's a great question. So playback theater, let me just start by saying I didn't invent this. This is an actual art form. So
is it really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was started in, to look at my notes, 1975.
Oh, wow.
And it's done in over 60 countries. So it's prevalent around the world, but it's not very known. It's the type of thing that people say, I had no idea this existed.
Yeah. I had never heard of it. Never seen anything like this before.
Yeah. So, and it's done in a whole bunch of different capacities, schools, communities. It can be done in healthcare settings, but I think, and I could be wrong, but because like I said, it's done in 60 countries. So I haven't checked every single place, but I'm pretty sure compassionate coaching is the only troupe, the only group that does this specifically for end of life and bereavement staff. So
Really?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. So what we do is we have a team. There's a facilitator, there are actors, and a musician or two. So it's a whole team. And what you experienced was on Zoom. You can do this virtually or you can do this in person. So walking through the process, let's just say it's a Zoom playback session.
Okay.
People would come and, what you experienced was just people from all over who are in that same field. When we work with, say, a particular hospice team or a particular group of end-of-life doulas or what have you, we work specifically with that group. So we've decided ahead of time, what the theme is. We could do a theme on how do you find joy. We could do the theme on what we did, which was, why are you in this field? What's your origin story for this work? And I work with you to find out what theme we're working towards. And then I like to open our sessions with music because music activates a certain type of, part of our brain that gets us more open to creativity, more open to vulnerability. And then the conductor or facilitator for the session will ask a question. And, it might be deep right away. We might just dive right into the topic of, why do you do this work? How did you get into this work? Or it could be more, a little less, vulnerable, like, how's your day going? Tell me a story about your day. And so one at a time, people will tell a story based on that question. And the facilitator is guiding them through the storytelling. They're asking questions and getting a few more details. And then once the story is done being told, then the facilitator, if we're together in person, we'll have everyone say, let's watch, which is kind of the trademark phrase to start a playback performance. After the story is told, the actors and the musician then play back the story. So hence the name playback theater. And we elevate it with music, with movement, with drama. We can be telling the story from different perspectives. As you witnessed, someone was a dog. You can be...
It was amazing, hilarious, but wonderful.
Yeah, so just all sorts of different options for who the actors are playing back. And then we play back that story. And then the teller, the person who told the story, will be invited back to just have a little check-in. And the facilitator will ask them, so how was that for you? Or, did that capture your story? What are your thoughts seeing your story played back? Something along those lines. We always want to check in just to see, did we hit the mark? Did we honor their story? And then it just continues on. Then the next teller will volunteer to tell a story and we're off to the races.
It was really very moving. So there were four of us, tellers.
4 tellers. Uh-huh.
Yes. And each one of us had a little bit of a different approach. And the last woman shared that she'd had some traumatic loss, but she talked about the loss of her dog. And so one of the actors, a wonderful guy, was her dog.
Mm-hmm.
And he got really close to the camera, and it was, how dogs are. They're in your face, and they're panting, and they're smiling, and a little hyper. And it was wonderful. And I watched the teller's face because she had gone from tears from the first section when they were talking about, I think it was your portrayal of some of her loss, the traumatic part of things. And then here's this next actor that makes her laugh with this portrayal of her dog. And just so personalized and very quickly to the heart of the story.
Yes.
That had been communicated. I mean, I found myself in tears. I shared something personal for my story about my caregiving role and my experience with my mom who has some dementia. And within a minute of you starting yours, I could feel the tears come It's very moving. And
Yes.
then the opportunity to reflect with the moderator really is a moment to debrief, I think. That's what we would call in an end-of-life care. If you had a team that had gone through a traumatic death, then you have a debriefing afterwards. That's sort of what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a little cathartic, a little cleansing.
Yes.
So really it's just a form of self-care.
Yes. Exactly. That's exactly it.
I hesitate to even use that word these days because I think it's been overused so much that it's lost meaning.
Yes.
But I really think to participate as an end-of-life worker, be able to share that story, like my origin story. I had a chance to share my origin story and then watch it played back, to reflect on it. And my thoughts about that were, that's still 15 years later, almost 15 years, an incredible story.
Yes.
It still inspires me. It still moves me. I still want to tell it.
Mm-hmm.
I want other people to tell their stories and be as inspired as I am by my own.
Yeah.
And damn, that was intense.
Yes.
It
It can
still-
be very intense.
It still had the same impact on me hearing somebody tell my story back to me
Yes.
as it would have a year after I went through it.
Yes.
Yeah, just incredibly impactful. So I realized as a participant the impact that it had on me and how the playback theater influenced how I felt and what I thought. What words would you describe the impact that the work has on you?
The playback work has on me?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, first, let me say part of our process is we get to rehearse with our own stories. So if we rehearse as a troupe, as a team, we're usually, you had the opportunity to be with us and share your story, but we're usually using our own stories. And so we get to experience the power of playback ourselves. And so since I know the power of it from a teller's perspective, I feel so confident in what we're offering to other people. And specifically being able to do playback for end-of-life workers, I would have to say the impact on myself has been profound, and my team, because we do playback for not in compassionate coaching, but I also do playback for other troops in the area because it's just such a beautiful art form. And the work that we do at compassionate coaching is so specific since it's for those end-of-life and bereavement professionals. It's deepened me as a person. It's deepened my spirituality. It's deepened my perspective. It's educated me. I mean, I have gotten the opportunity to really have this beautiful lens into the day-to-day life of people who work at the bedside. And it's just an honor, really. I have gotten the opportunity to think about my own end of life and end of life of my own family members and, what I would want and what I hope for them. And it's really shaped the way I live to be touching into that world in such a vulnerable way. And, there's a group, I affectionately call them my death and grief ladies. There's a group of, one of them's a funeral director, a grief coach, end of life doula. Like there's just a handful of us in the area that, we hang out or we run into each other every once in a while. And I'm telling you, Helen, like these ladies know how to live. Like when you are in that field, I think you just really learn how to live. And so I'm gaining that knowledge too, just like the joy and the laughter and the life lovingness of this group of ladies. It's so powerful. So I've really gained a lot for myself from the experience.
Do you and your troop ever have to sort of debrief for yourself or decompress as a group after? Because
absolutely.
So we know that carrying a story for someone else can be very heavy.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I understand what you're doing is for the teller, but as a group, as individuals, when you get done, do you have to take a deep breath and figure out how to decompress for yourselves?
Absolutely. We absolutely do. And in fact, one of my favorite processes for doing that, we call it take and leave. And we just, we have a moment together. We're separate from everyone else. And we did this very briefly on Zoom after the workshop you attended. But we each share something that they want to take from the experience and something we want to leave. So it might be, I take, Gregory's portrayal of the dog, like that just really touched my heart, and it helped me feel, the hopefulness and the levity in the day, even though it was so heavy. Like that, I might take that, and then I might leave, something personal, like if I was unsure of because it's unscripted, like it's spontaneous.
Right, it's all improv.
Yeah, it's all improv. So we're taking people are taking a risk by telling their stories, and we are really taking a risk by improvising their stories. And so I might have a personal I don't feel good about my portrayal of so-and-so, or, I wish I had said this instead, or, so we might leave something, and then we're all just sharing it together so that, and there might just be a moment afterwards where someone will come to me, Gregory might come to me and say, I know you said you wanted to leave that, but I actually thought that was really powerful because, so-and-so said later that, her takeaway was that it was spot on or something, so it's also an opportunity for someone to one of our teammates to check in with each other and say, I know you wanted to leave that. I know you feel unsettled about that, but let me tell you why I think it's good that you did it.
Yeah. A little bit of accountability there and perspective.
Yes.
Which I think is very, very healthy.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about the resources that you have coming to your website, because it's almost time for us to close. And I want to talk about how listeners can connect with you and figure out how to work with compassionate coaching. But you have some new resources that are going to be coming for end-of-life and bereavement professionals.
Yes.
Tell me about those.
So for people in end-of-life and bereavement who manage a team, we have a burnout barometer.
Burnout barometer.
Yes.
I like it.
Do you like it?
That's a great name.
Thanks. I'm happy with the name too. And you just answer a few questions, and then it takes like 90 seconds at most. And then you just get an email that says, this is where you are on the burnout barometer.
Right.
Are you in the safe zone? Are you approaching burnout, or are you in dangerously close to burnout? So that's one thing that you'll get on the website. And then the other thing is for anyone who works or volunteers in the end of life fields, whether you manage a team or not, it's for anyone. And it's a transition routine. So it's an audio file. It's a little less than 5 minutes long, and it's meant to help you transition from work to home. So you can listen to it, when you are done working and you get to your car before you drive, or once you drive home. Some people use the drive home to, listen to music and try and get some energy back, or even just let yourself process the day. But then once you get home, before you enter the home, to transition yourself so that you can be present for your family. And like you said, the debriefing process is so important to leave some of that behind so that you can really be ready for the next thing in your life.
Well, I love it that you're thinking about volunteers too, because I think volunteers have a tendency to be forgotten.
Yes.
We love it when they do stuff for our patients, but when it comes to supporting them after they have also lost a patient, I think we forget about the grief needs of our volunteers. So those resources, when they come up on your website, is there going to be a fee for using those?
Oh, no. These are free.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me how people can connect in with you with compassionate coaching to set up an event, find out how that works for their team.
Yes. Thank you, Helen. So at Compassionate Coaching, we help end-of-life and bereavement professionals stay in the field as long as they want and not leave because of burnout. So you can find us on the internet at compassionatecoaching.org. And that's where you'll find the free resources as well. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. I know that's how you and I met. And so I love getting messages on LinkedIn. You can just find me and you can send me a DM on LinkedIn. Or you can also, on my website, if you want to reach out, there's a little contact form that you can reach out to me there.
We'll have links in the show notes so people can get a hold of you. So, Erin, one last question. If you were sitting here one-on-one with an end-of-life worker who is burned out, discouraged, and experiencing compassion fatigue, what would you tell them?
First, I would look them in the eyes and I would say, you're not alone. And there's hope. And that might be enough. They might feel a sense of that was enough. I would also encourage them to find someone that they can connect with to share that sense of isolation, that sense of needing their cup filled. Someone not a venting partner, but a real caring, loving person who wants what's best for you, someone that they can turn to express and to ask for support and love. That's, I would say, you find your person to help you with that.
Yeah. You're not alone, and find your person. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Erin, thank you so much for talking with me on the show today. It's been great to have you here.
It's been so lovely, Helen. Thank you.
Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com, and don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice on Facebook and Instagram, and send your questions or comments by email to helen@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.